Hi, I'm Juno, and this is the creative process of an illustration I made for the 2021 Copic Award. To make this one, I had to go through a few steps, so I decided to share my process and hopefully give you some ideas on how you can improve your creative process. Research. So, the first thing you need to do is research. I already had some idea of what I wanted to depict. Something based on a childhood memory I had with my brother, so I just needed to look for a few references that captured the feeling I wanted to put on mine. I believe that it's really important that you do some research before you start your drawing. Finding ways to be inspired, going for blogs, apps, social media pages, or even the good old Google, where you can check out what is more relevant for the draw you want to do. But keep in mind that you have to narrow it all down as much as possible, because it is really easy to get overwhelmed or distracted while researching. Save what you need and move on to the next step. Composition. After my research, I still wasn't happy. So I decided to create a scene that could approach what I had in mind. So I used this program called Lumion that I use for architecture design that allows me to create a landscape from zero. Here, I was able to arrange terrain, the trees, and even adjust the lighting in the whole scene. This one here was made only to show you how I used the software, because I forgot to record the process of the first one I did. And just to be clear, you don't need to know any 3D program to start your composition. I did this one like this because I wanted something very specific, but it could be easily done by hand, sketching multiple times. In the end, I was happy with this picture where I showed these kids running home, as it was closer to what I had in mind. Colors. Choosing colors, it was not easy. As I had to use Copic markers to do this piece, I had to pay some attention to the colors. I'm building up my own Copic collection, so I don't dispose of many colors, and with that, I mainly based my color palette to the colors that I have refills. So I went to my iPad over an app called Concepts, where the colors are arranged in the same Copic color system. So I was able to check the colors digitally and try to use them in a Procreate app, where I did my sketching and coloring test. I ended up with 14 colors. Most of them were warm colors and a few light ones. You can choose the colors beforehand or after your overall concept or even after your drawing is done. But in this case, it would all depend on the ones I could actually use. Sketching and trying colors. So I got my colors and then moved to my sketch. I started blocking the overall shapes because I think it is an easier way for you to get your proportions, shape blocking the whole scene. Then, I tried different concepts for my main characters. I used the shapes to draw the vegetation, the mountains, and begin working on my characters, and then made the fine lines where I could use it as the final reference. You can also do this part of the process with the tools you have. Do your sketch first with a light pencil so you can easily erase it if you need to change anything. After my sketch was done, I filled in the colors, color blocking each element of the scene. With that, I was able to paint in different layers with the colors palette I got from the Concept app. By doing it first digitally, I was able to save my Copics by having a visual of how the lighting would be and how I could manage to use only the few tones I had available. At this point, I was really happy with the color and I was hoping to be able to make the tone on paper look just the same. The last thing before transferring into paper was making sure to separate the drawing in 7 layers with different colors, as I wanted to make it a multiple layer cutted paper to give it some more depth. Layering. I transferred my illustration to my computer and used my monitor to do my sketch on the paper over the screen with a light drawing pencil. just so I could save some time instead of doing the whole drawing again. I used the color line guides I traced over the sketch to make sure it was all in the right order. Using my Uni-P Nanking pen, I made my final drawing, going over the lines and adding all the details I needed. After, I used my craft knife set to cut out the first layer and used an eraser to clean out the lighter lines of the drawing. Coloring. Now, to be honest, I haven't used my Copic for some time and they are a bit tricky to work with, even more than watercolor, so I started making a chart with all the colors to compare with the ones I had digitally, and started painting the bushes with the lighter warm tones. I added more gray, layer by layer, building up the contrast and kept on painting the other details on the first layer. Done with the first one, I went to the second, where I have a tree and some more bushes to do. But this time, instead of painting it, I decided to do the lines with the Nanking pen and cutting out the parts first and coloring later. The cutting out part was a bit hard. I had to keep pushing the craft knife carefully not to cut out anything that was not meant to, especially the small details of the characters and the trees. Now with all layers cutted, it's time to paint them. So I kept following the digital reference I had and eventually recharging the Copic I was using the most. For the sky, I believe it was the hardest part for me. I had trouble getting the color mix right and had to actually do it twice because I wasn't happy with the first one. In the end, it turned out okay. These are the Copic colors all set to the drawing. Now I just needed to do some fine details and add on some texture. At this point, I was already in love with the colors, especially the sky, as it gave it the vibrancy I needed to this piece. But some colors, like the bushes and the trees, were looking a bit washed. Fine details. At this point, I got some soft colored pencils and add the extra details to characters and some texture to the overall landscape. Then I finished it, gluing all the layers together. This is how it looks done. I was pretty happy with the colors, the characters, and the little details I added on. The sky was the more difficult part to paint, but it turned out to be one of my favorite parts. I called it an exciting adventure. As a child, I saw everything as an adventure. The exciting feeling about the new and how I saw things. In this illustration, I wanted to share with you some of the joy of venturing out, discovering and spending time with the ones you love. The use of warm colors ended up confirming it even more. It gave the lightness and a hearty feeling I wanted to transmit. I appreciate that you followed along so far. I hope I did add something that can help you somehow on your art journey. And if you want, you can stay tuned for more content by subscribing. Thumbs up if you like it, and let me know in the comments what you think about this illustration or if you have a different drawing process. Thank you, see you next time.